The knock came just as Leah was locking the front door, a sharp, impatient pounding that made her flinch. She turned, heart racing. No one knocked like that unless they wanted something. Something urgent. Something bad. It was barely 3 hours after her father's funeral. The house was dim, heavy with the silence that comes after too many tears. Naomi had finally cried herself to sleep on the couch. Ezra sat cross-legged on the floor, headphones in, pretending not to exist. Micah stood near the window, his back stiff, arms folded. Leah hadn't even changed out of her black dress. Another knock. Louder this time. Ben. Who is it? She called out, her voice raw. Your uncle's, a voice replied. Leah's stomach turned. She opened the door slowly, and there they were. Dennis Daniels. Her father's older brother. Impeccably dressed, like he hadn't just come from burying his brother. And beside him, Curtis Daniels, their youngest uncle, eyes cold as marble. Both men wore solemn expressions, but neither looked like they were mourning. Dennis offered a tight smile. Evening, Leah. Can we come in? She stared at them. No. It's late. Curtis gave a dry chuckle. Death doesn't run on business hours. Without waiting for permission, they stepped into the house. The living room still smelled of funeral lilies and half-eaten casseroles dropped off by neighbors. Ezra glanced up from the floor, pulling out one earbud. Micah moved to Leah's side, his gaze hard and unwelcoming. Dennis took a seat on the couch, brushing aside a sympathy card without a second glance. Curtis remained standing, hands behind his back like he was preparing to deliver a verdict. We're not going to take much of your time, Dennis began smoothly. We know things have been overwhelming. So much loss so quickly. Leah said nothing. Her fists clenched at her sides. That's why we're here, Curtis said, skipping the niceties. To help sort things out. What things? Leah asked slowly. The future, Dennis replied. Of the house. The kids. You. Leah blinked. The future of my family? You mean Micah, Ezra, and Naomi? Curtis nodded. That's right. We've already sorted it out, she said, voice sharp. They're staying with me. This is their home. Dennis sighed as if she'd disappointed him. Leah, you're 20. You dropped out of school. No job that pays more than minimum wage. You're a child raising children. I'm their sister. But not their legal guardian, Curtis cut in. There's a difference. Leah's heart pounded. Dad left everything to us. To me. He said he had it all in writing. Dennis leaned back casually. Funny thing. We've looked through his files. There's no will. No trust. No documentation whatsoever. She froze. That's not possible. Curtis reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded paper. This is a notice from our attorney. We've filed with the court to assume guardianship of the children. Her voice cracked. You're taking them from me? Dennis gave her that same tight smile. We're providing stability, structure, resources. These kids need adults who can give them a life. Not just survive. I am giving them a life, Leah shot back. Micah stepped forward. We're fine. You think living in a half-paid-off house with no income is fine? Curtis scoffed. Your parents had debts. This house isn't even fully owned. Leah shook her head. You're lying. Dad always paid on time. He had savings. Dennis stood. Not anymore. Without a will, the estate is ours to manage. You have 3 days to vacate. What? 3 days, Curtis repeated. Then the house is ours. The court date is in 2 weeks. The kids will stay with us until the matter is finalized. I won't let you do this. You don't have a choice. Curtis handed her the document. She didn't take it. It fluttered to the ground. They turned and walked to the door, pausing only once. You're not equipped for this, Leah, Dennis said. Don't make things harder than they already are. The door closed behind them with a solid, definitive click. Leah stood frozen. Ezra was staring at her, wide-eyed. Micah's jaw was tight, fists clenched. From upstairs, Naomi's soft footsteps echoed as she peeked down the stairs, clutching her stuffed bunny. What's happening? She asked, voice small. Leah bent to pick up the document. Her hands trembled. She stared at the names. The legal threats. The deadline. "They're trying to take you away," she said quietly. Naomi's lip quivered. "Why?" Leah couldn't answer. That night, after she tucked Naomi back into bed and made sure Ezra was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with Micah. He hadn't said much since the uncles left. "Are they serious?" he finally asked. "They're really going to try to take us?" Leah nodded. "They think we're weak. That we'll roll over." He leaned forward. "We're not going to, right?" She met his eyes. "No. We're not." She grabbed her old spiral notebook from the shelf and flipped to a clean page. In big, bold letters she wrote, "Day 1. They want to break us. We won't let them." Leah barely slept. Her mind kept looping the same phrases. No will. 3 days. Vacate. She lay on the worn mattress in her parents' old room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled hum of the heater and the occasional creak of wood as the house breathed its final nights with them inside. By morning, she had made a decision. She brewed the last of the coffee, packed peanut butter sandwiches for the kids, and sent Micah, Ezra, and Naomi off to school like it was any normal day. Then she took the bus downtown, wearing her best blazer, which still had a tear under the arm she hadn't had time to fix. She walked into Whitmore and Associates, the small law firm where her father had supposedly filed his documents years ago. Her palms were sweating as she stepped up to the receptionist desk. "I'm looking for information on my father's estate," she said. His name was Robert Daniels. He passed away last week. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with tight curls and reading glasses, gave her a quick once-over. "I'm sorry for your loss. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but, please. It's urgent. My uncles are trying to take my siblings away. They say there's no will." "I know that's not true." The woman softened slightly. "Let me check." She clicked away on her keyboard. Leah held her breath. A minute passed. Another. Finally, the woman looked up. "We don't have any record of a will under that name. No estate file. Nothing." Leah blinked. "That can't be right. My dad told me, he showed me a folder last year. Said everything was taken care of." "Perhaps he filed through another firm?" "No," Leah insisted. "It was this one. He said he spoke with a Mr. Langston." The woman's expression changed. Not surprise, something like discomfort. "Mr. Langston no longer works here," she said carefully. "He left the firm 2 years ago." "Can I speak to someone who worked with him? Maybe they know where the documents went." "I'm sorry," the woman said again. "Without any record, we can't disclose anything else." Leah stood frozen. "You're telling me it's all just gone?" The woman offered a sympathetic smile, but it was hollow. "Sometimes wills aren't officially filed. Sometimes people change their minds. I suggest contacting probate court if you believe something is missing." Leah left the building with her fists clenched and throat tight. Outside, the wind was brutal. She wrapped her coat tighter and walked until she found herself in front of the county courthouse. If Dad had a will, and someone erased it, there has to be a record somewhere. She took a breath and stepped inside. The probate clerk's office was smaller than she expected. A single desk. A man with glasses. Piles of folders stacked high. She walked up and repeated her request. The man looked up slowly. "Robert Daniels," she said. "Deceased. I'm looking for any probate filings, wills, estate transfers. Anything." He pulled out a search form, typed into his computer. "No filings on record," he said flatly. "If he died intestate, that means without a will, his estate falls under default state procedure." "But he did have a will," she insisted. The clerk shrugged. "Not according to the system." "Who's listed as executor?" "There is no executor. No will, no executor. And if the next of kin filed for guardianship or property decisions, it would fall to them." "The next of kin?" she asked, heart-dropping. "Usually the spouse. But if both parents are deceased, it would go to adult siblings, then surviving brothers or sisters of the deceased." "Which would be my uncles," she muttered. "Exactly." She stepped back from the counter. Everything was spiraling. They had filed first. They had made themselves look like heroes. And legally, unless she could prove otherwise, they were the rightful guardians. As she walked out of the courthouse, Leah felt something break inside her. Not panic. Not tears. Resolve. If they had erased the will, forged papers, hidden documents, she would find out. She wouldn't let this be the end. At home that night, she sat down with Micah and told him everything. "There's no will," she said. "No record. No backup copy. The law sees us as nothing." "They destroyed it," Micah said through gritted teeth. "They had to. There's no way Dad didn't leave anything." "I know." Micah stared at the wall. "So what do we do now?" Leah opened her notebook and wrote across the top of the page. "Day 2. If they erase the truth, I'll dig until I find it." She looked up. "We don't give them a reason to win," she said. "We plan. We move when we have to. But we don't stop fighting." Micah nodded. "And the kids?" "We don't tell Naomi yet. Ezra knows something's wrong, but he doesn't need the full story. Not yet." Micah exhaled slowly. "I hate them." "I know," she said. "But we can't let hate guide us. We fight smart. Quiet. Like Dad would have done." Before bed, she dug through every folder in the house. Old bank statements, tax records, bills, insurance letters. Nothing. No copy of the will. No name of the bank. No trace of Mr. Langston beyond one old business card with a disconnected number. But something told her this wasn't over. Not even close. 3 days. That's all the time they had to pack up an entire life. Leah didn't argue. She didn't scream. She didn't call the uncles again. She just stuffed their history into cardboard boxes. Photos, blankets, Ezra's basketball trophies, Naomi's sketchbooks, and taped them shut like sealing wounds. On the 3rd morning, she stood on the front porch one last time, looking at the cracked steps where she used to sit with Dad on summer nights, watching lightning bugs glow over the lawn. She took a deep breath, held it, and didn't let herself cry. The rented U-Haul was barely big enough for their things. She drove it herself. Micah followed behind in a borrowed sedan, Ezra beside him with Naomi sleeping in the backseat. Their new home was in South Oak, a neighborhood that never made it onto real estate brochures. The basement apartment was listed on Craigslist for $750, cash only. No questions asked. When the landlord opened the door, the smell of dampness hit her like a wall. "Still needs a bit of airin' out," the woman said, keys jingling in her hand. "But the heat works." "Mostly." Leah looked around. The ceilings were low. One small window let in just enough light to see the cracks on the concrete floor. The kitchen was more of a nook with 2 rusty burners and a half-size fridge. The bathroom smelled like bleach and mold. "We'll take it," she said. The woman looked surprised. "You sure?" "We don't have time to be picky." The woman, whose name was Mrs. Holden, hesitated. "I usually need first and last month's rent." Leah opened her wallet. "I have $820 total. Will that cover 1 month and deposit?" Mrs. Holden eyed the kids through the open door, then sighed. "All right, just don't bring trouble." They moved in that night. The couch became Ezra's bed. Naomi and Leah shared the only bedroom. Micah slept on a mattress on the floor by the wall heater. They had 2 lamps, no Wi-Fi, and 1 pan. But it was theirs. For now. Leah found work fast. She took a part-time job at a nearby convenience store. The owner, Mr. Darnell, paid $9 an hour under the table and didn't ask for background checks. Every morning, she stocked shelves before sunrise, walked home to pack school lunches, then watched the kids leave through the tiny window. In the afternoon, she picked up shifts delivering groceries for a local app, burning gas in a borrowed car from a family friend, hoping each tip stretched far enough. At night, she babysat for a wealthy couple in Riverside Heights, reading bedtime stories to a toddler who had her own tablet and 4 different sleep sound machines. Every dollar she earned went into food, rent, utilities, bus passes. She slept maybe 4 hours a night. Ate only after the kids were full. Sometimes skipped meals altogether. By the 2nd month, the lights flickered but stayed on. By the 3rd month, she'd memorized the layout of every discount store within 5 miles. By the 4th, her fingers were blistered from cleaning, and Naomi had stopped asking when they were going home. Micah adapted faster than the others. At 16, he was old enough to understand the stakes. He took over dinner duties, learned how to stretch canned beans and rice into something almost filling. He did laundry at the coin wash, made sure Naomi brushed her teeth, reminded Ezra to charge his school tablet. "You don't have to do all this," Leah told him one night. He shrugged. "You work. I help. We survive." Ezra, now 13, struggled harder. He went from a quiet suburb to a school where teachers rotated out like fast food workers and kids settled arguments with fists. He didn't complain, but Leah noticed how he stopped drawing, started sleeping with the covers over his head, barely touched dinner. Naomi was too young to process it all. She missed her old bed, her art supplies, her parents. She asked fewer questions each day, but her silence said more than words. Sometimes at night, Leah would find her curled in a ball, whispering to the wall. "Mom? Are you there? If you can hear me, please tell Leah not to be so tired anymore." Those nights broke Leah more than the hunger or the fear or the cold. By their first winter in the basement, Leah was working 3 jobs. She carried hand sanitizer in her purse, tape in her pocket to fix her shoes, and a list of which bills she could push into the next cycle without losing service. The apartment was freezing. She layered Naomi in sweaters and wrapped the windows in plastic, hoping it would keep the wind out. Then one night the power went off. No warning. No mercy. She had missed the payment by 4 days. The kids came home to a dark, cold apartment. Leah sat on the floor, surrounded by candles, pretending it was a game. "Indoor camping," she said cheerfully. "Who wants to roast imaginary marshmallows?" Naomi giggled. Ezra rolled his eyes. Micah played along. They huddled together on the couch under every blanket they owned. Leah read aloud from a library book by candlelight, and for 2 hours, it felt like they weren't surviving. They were living. That night, after everyone fell asleep, Leah sat alone and pulled out her notebook. She flipped past the first 2 pages and wrote, "Day 64, we lost light, but not each other." She stared at the sentence. Then she underlined it twice. The first sign came from a book. It was a Saturday morning in February, the kind where cold seeped through the walls no matter how many layers they wore. Leah was scrubbing dried milk off the stovetop while Naomi sat cross-legged in the corner, going through one of the storage bins they kept their books in. Suddenly, Naomi gasped. "Leah," she said softly, "this has Daddy's handwriting." Leah turned, wiping her hands on a towel. Naomi held up a worn, hardback copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. It had belonged to their father. The cover was faded, the edges frayed from years of use. Leah knelt beside her. "Where?" Naomi opened the back cover. Taped there was a folded note. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the handwriting was unmistakable, Robert Daniels' bold, looping script. Leah's hands trembled as she took it. "If anything ever happens to me, check with Merrill and Bay Trust. Everything you'll need is there. The account is under my full name. For the children. For their future." There was no signature. No date. Just that one directive, tucked away like a lifeline buried in ink and paper. Leah stared at it for several seconds before whispering, "I knew it. I knew he wouldn't leave us with nothing." Micah looked up from the couch where he was sketching a floor plan for a school project. "What is it?" Leah handed him the letter. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. "Merrill and Bay," he said. "That's not a regular bank." "It's a trust management firm," Leah said, her voice rising with cautious hope. "He must have set something up." Ezra leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "But if there was a trust, why didn't anyone tell us?" "Because someone didn't want us to know," Leah replied. The next Monday, Leah borrowed Mrs. Holden's old car, a 2001 sedan with peeling paint and a cassette player, and drove across the city to Merrill and Bay Trust, a sleek office tower with glass doors and security guards in tailored suits. She felt wildly out of place walking in with her worn coat and scratched purse, but she held her head high. At the front desk, she gave her name. The receptionist smiled politely. "How can I help you?" "I'm here to inquire about a trust. Robert Daniels. He passed away last year. He was my father." The woman's fingers danced over the keyboard. I see. There is a record of an account in that name. Leah's heart jumped. However, the receptionist continued, access is restricted. Do you have documentation proving you're a beneficiary? No, Leah admitted. That's the problem. I think the legal paperwork was interfered with. I see. The woman hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. There's a note on the file. It says access is contingent upon certain conditions, one of which is the beneficiary reaching age 25. Leah frowned. There's no executor? There was. A Mr. Langston. But he hasn't been in contact for over a year. The firm sent notices to the listed address, but received no response. Her stomach twisted. Langston was my dad's lawyer. He's disappeared. I'm sorry, the woman said gently. Without proper verification or legal authority, there's nothing we can release. Leah nodded, backing away. Thank you. As she left the building, the wind hit her hard. But she didn't feel cold. Not in the way she had yesterday. There was something. A trust. A plan. A name. The thread had been buried, but not cut. She pulled out her notebook in the car and wrote, Day 91. The truth exists. They just hid it well. Back at home, Leah spread out everything she could remember, old emails from her father, appointment reminders, random business cards, a handwritten list of passwords he'd once given her for the Wi-Fi. None of it mentioned Merrill and Bay. None of it mentioned Langston. But it had to connect. Micah joined her at the table, reviewing the note from the book. He was always specific when it came to instructions. If he said it's there, it's there. But someone blocked it, she murmured. Langston. My uncles. They filed papers before I had time to look up. Ezra sat across from them. You think they got rid of the will? I know they did, Leah said. And I think Langston helped. Micah glanced at her. So what now? We find him. Ezra snorted. The guy ghosted 2 firms. No one's seen him in over a year. He could be dead. Then we find someone who knew him. Someone who can confirm whether he ever filed Dad's will. Micah pointed to the letter. He named the bank. He left instructions. There has to be a copy somewhere. Naomi appeared in the doorway, clutching her bear. Is Daddy helping us from heaven? Leah's voice caught. Maybe, baby. Maybe he is. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Leah sat on the floor, legs tucked beneath her, notebook in her lap. She had no legal standing. No money. No degree. But she had her father's words. She had her brother's. She had Naomi's faith. And now, she had a thread. She closed her eyes and whispered aloud, Hang on, Dad. I'm going to fix this. Then she opened her notebook and underlined what she had written. The truth exists. They just hid it well. 3 days later, Leah returned to Merrill and Bay Trust. This time, she wasn't alone. Micah came with her, wearing the only button-down shirt he owned, and Ezra tagged along too, arms crossed, daring someone to challenge their right to be there. They walked through the lobby like soldiers stepping onto a battlefield. At the receptionist desk, Leah held her voice steady. We'd like to speak with someone regarding the trust of Robert Daniels. It's urgent. The woman looked surprised to see them back. Ms. Daniels, she said, we don't typically allow walk-ins for this type of matter. I understand, Leah said, carefully sliding the folded letter from her coat pocket. But this note is in my father's handwriting. He left it in one of his books. He mentioned your firm by name. He said everything we needed would be here. The receptionist hesitated. One moment. They waited. Micah tapped his foot against the marble floor. Ezra stared at the ceiling. Finally, a man in a dark suit approached them. He looked to be in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense posture. Ms. Daniels, he said, I'm Mr. Holbrook. I'm head of client services. Please, come with me. They followed him into a glass-walled office overlooking the skyline. Leah could barely focus on the view. Mr. Holbrook sat across from them. We're limited in what we can disclose, but given the circumstances, I'll review what I'm allowed to share. He opened a file on his laptop. Your father, Robert Daniels, established a family trust with our firm 7 years ago. The primary beneficiaries were listed as his children: Micah, Ezra, Naomi, and you, Leah. Leah felt her throat tighten. The trust was built with several funding sources, Holbrook continued. Private investments, stocks, royalties from patents he held with the transportation company he co-founded. Micah's head snapped toward her. Wait, Dad co-founded that company? Holbrook nodded. Yes. Carter Daniels Logistics. His 40% stake was substantial. At the time of his death, the trust value was estimated at approximately $100 million. The room spun. Ezra muttered, "You're kidding." "I wish I were," Holbrook replied solemnly. "The issue is this. The trust had stipulations. The children were to receive portions upon reaching specific ages, 18, 21, 25. Leah, as the eldest, was to receive temporary control until full access at age 25. "I'm 20 now," she whispered. Holbrook continued. The trust required an executor to facilitate those disbursements. That executor was listed as Mr. Thomas Langston. Micah leaned forward. "We've been trying to find him. He's vanished." "Yes," Holbrook agreed. "Our firm sent repeated communications, certified letters, and follow-up requests. None were returned. Without an active executor or valid court reassignment, the account has remained locked." "Locked?" Leah echoed. "Meaning no one has touched the money?" "Correct. The assets remain under our stewardship, accruing interest. However, 3 years ago, we received a request from an outside party attempting to claim executor status." Leah's blood went cold. "Who?" Holbrook hesitated. "Two individuals. Dennis Daniels and Curtis Daniels. Your uncles." Ezra slammed his fist on the armrest. "I knew it. They presented documents," Holbrook said, "but our legal team found inconsistencies. Signatures that didn't match prior filings. One document appeared to have been altered. We denied their request and flagged the account." "So they knew," Leah whispered. "They knew it was here and tried to take it." Mr. Holbrook nodded. "It appears so." "Why didn't you report them?" Micah asked sharply. "Our policy is to protect the integrity of client accounts. The matter was documented internally and frozen. We could not proceed without a legal ruling or verified will." Leah pulled out her notebook, flipping to the back where she kept all her research. "What if I can prove they destroyed the will? What if I can find Langston, or prove what he did?" Holbrook studied her. "If you can provide documentation that the original will existed, or find Langston and obtain testimony, we may be able to petition the court to reinstate your access and appoint you as trustee." Ezra exhaled. "So there's still a chance." "There's always a chance," Holbrook said. "But proving will fraud is extremely difficult, especially after this much time." Leah nodded, jaw clenched. "You said the account was accruing interest?" Micah asked. "Yes," Holbrook confirmed. "As of last quarter, the trust was valued at $127 million. A silence fell over the room. $127 million. And they'd been rationing toilet paper. Leah rose slowly from her seat. "Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. You've helped more than you know." He stood. "Bring us the proof, Ms. Daniels. We'll do our part." In the parking garage, Leah leaned against the cold car door, trembling. Ezra spoke first. "They didn't just steal money. They stole years," Micah said. "No," Leah said quietly. "They tried to, but they didn't win. We're still here." She looked at both of them. "This changes everything. But we're not there yet." Micah nodded. "We need Langston." Leah flipped open her notebook and scrawled. Day 96, $127 million. Still untouched. Still ours. She paused. Then underlined it. Twice. Leah had never hired a lawyer before. She didn't know the difference between a civil rights attorney, a state litigator, or a trust advisor. All she knew was that her family had been robbed of money, of safety, of time, and if she was going to fix it, she couldn't do it alone. The next 2 weeks were a blur of rejection. 23 calls. 17 emails. 7 in-person visits. Most firms didn't even let her pass the receptionist. Some asked for retainer fees that made her stomach flip. One man actually chuckled when she said she couldn't pay up front. "This case sounds complicated," he'd said, adjusting his tie. "You're talking about proving estate fraud after the fact, identifying forged documents, finding a missing executor? That's not pro bono work. That's a career case." Leah left with her jaw clenched and her pride bleeding. It was Micah who found the name. "Try her," he said, sliding a printed article across the table. "She just opened her own firm. Used to work for a nonprofit. Seems like she actually cares about justice." The name on the page read, Alyssa Grant, ESQ, Advocacy with Teeth. Leah made the call. She expected another polite brush-off. Instead, Alyssa picked up herself. "Grant Law." Alyssa speaking. Her voice was sharp, calm, not tired like the others. Leah hesitated. "Hi. I don't know if I'm calling the right kind of attorney, but I think my family stole our inheritance. All of it. And they tried to erase the will." There was a pause. "Come in tomorrow," Alyssa said. "Bring everything you have." Alyssa's office was small. No marble floors. No assistants in suits. Just a second-floor walk-up above a florist shop with a squeaky ceiling fan and a dented filing cabinet. But the moment Leah stepped in, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Alyssa stood to greet her. She was in her early 30s, black, with locks pulled back in a low bun and a look in her eyes like she'd seen the system at its worst and still hadn't flinched. "You must be Leah." Leah handed her a folder thick with handwritten notes, photocopies, and the letter from their father. Alyssa read in silence for 20 minutes. Micah sat stiffly in the corner. Ezra bounced his knee, eyes darting between Alyssa's expressions. Finally, Alyssa looked up. "This is one of the most blatant, deliberate cases of inheritance fraud I've ever seen." Leah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You believe us?" Alyssa arched an eyebrow. "I believe your notebook more than most corporate records I've seen. You documented everything. Timelines, quotes, suspicious behavior, and the letter from your father ties directly to the locked trust account." Ezra leaned forward. "So, can we sue them?" "Yes," Alyssa said simply. "But we're going to need more." She stood and paced slowly, her lawyer mind already ticking. "Langston is the key. If we can find him and get a sworn affidavit, or better, a confession, we can reopen the estate, challenge the false filings, and reclaim the trust." Leah swallowed. "What if he won't talk?" Alyssa gave a half-smile. "Everyone talks. It's just about pressure." Micah narrowed his eyes. "We don't have money." "I don't want your money," Alyssa said. "I want the win." Leah blinked. Alyssa leaned on the desk. "They stole from children. They destroyed a father's legacy. They erased a family's future and slept like kings while you rationed soup cans. I'm not doing this for charity. I'm doing it because this kind of injustice infuriates me." Ezra grinned. "I like her." Alyssa turned back to Leah. "We'll start with locating Langston. I have contacts who can help. In the meantime, I need every document you can get, emails, letters, even utility bills tied to your father's name." "I have a binder," Leah said. "Two, actually." Alyssa smiled. "Good. Bring them tomorrow." As they left the office, Micah whispered, "She's a bulldog." "She's a lifeline," Leah whispered back. That night, Leah couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because something was shifting. For the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight alone. Micah and Ezra were growing stronger every day. Naomi was drawing again. And now, there was someone fighting with them, not against them. She sat on the floor, flipped to a fresh page in her notebook and wrote, "Day 109. We found our advocate. This is war." She underlined it once. Then closed the notebook and finally, slept. Langston was living in a trailer behind a pawn shop in Augusta, Georgia. Alyssa found him within 5 days. "It wasn't easy," she told Leah over the phone. "But I've got contacts in state records and a few retired investigators who owed me favors." Turns out, he cashed in a few remaining assets after leaving his firm, bought a used RV, and disappeared. "Does he know we're looking for him?" Leah asked. He will by the time I'm done. They drove down that Saturday. The air outside Augusta was thick with heat and silence. The pawn shop's lot was a graveyard of broken televisions and rusted lawnmowers. Behind it, under the shade of two half-dead trees, sat the trailer, sun-bleached, dented, sad. Alyssa knocked on the metal door, sharp and deliberate. No answer. She knocked again. "Mr. Langston? We're not here to cause trouble. But we need to talk." The door creaked open. And there he was. Thomas Langston, once a respected estate attorney, now barefoot in a wrinkled t-shirt, his eyes sunken and rimmed red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week or a year. "I don't want any more trouble," he mumbled. "We're not trouble," Alyssa said calmly. "But if you don't talk to us now, you're going to face it anyway. Because I'm filing in court with or without your statement." He stared at her, then at Leah. Something in her eyes must have hit him. Recognition. Guilt. Maybe both. "You're his daughter," he said quietly. "Yes," Leah replied. "Robert Daniels was my father. You were his lawyer. You were supposed to protect what he built." Langston winced. "I need you to tell the truth," she continued, "because what you did destroyed our lives." He stepped back and let them in. The trailer smelled like stale beer and old regret. Papers were stacked in the corner. An empty whiskey bottle rolled under the couch. On the small table sat an unopened letter addressed to Thomas Langston, Esq. Final notice. Langston sat down slowly, breathing like every movement hurt. "They paid me $50,000, he said finally. "I was in debt. Divorce wiped me out. IRS was closing in. Your uncles came to me a week after your father died. Said there was no need to involve probate court." "They knew about the trust," Alyssa said. "They did," he nodded. "Your dad showed me the paperwork personally. He had everything lined up. A will. A letter of instruction. He named Leah as the primary guardian. He left everything to the four of you. Then why?" Leah started, her voice cracking. "Why would you do it?" Langston stared down at his shaking hands. "They told me you were too young. That you'd mess it all up. They said they'd divide the money fairly and make sure the kids were cared for. I wanted to believe them. But I knew it was a lie. And you still went through with it." "I did," he whispered. "I shredded the will. Destroyed the letter. Gave them forged documents to present to the court, ones that made it look like your father died intestate. That made them look like the only viable guardians." He ran a hand down his face. "I kept thinking I'd fix it. I told myself I'd come forward once I was stable. But then years passed. And I hated myself more each day." Leah felt cold all over. "You stole our future." Langston looked at her, eyes glassy. "I know. And I deserve whatever happens. But if there's a way to undo it, if I can testify, sign an affidavit, give you names, dates, I'll do it." "You will," Alyssa said firmly. "And you'll do it under oath." Back in the car, Leah couldn't speak for a long time. Micah sat behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. Ezra stared out the window, his reflection pale in the glass. It was Ezra who finally broke the silence. "They paid someone to erase us." "No," Leah said quietly. "They tried." She opened her notebook on her lap and wrote. Day 117. He confessed. "We were right. They lied." Then she added, "We're going to court." The conference room at Grant Law was nothing like the polished boardrooms Leah remembered from her father's old company. There were no chandeliers, no high-backed leather chairs, just a long wooden table, worn from use, and a pitcher of tap water sweating in the middle. But it was here, in this modest room above a florist shop, that the war lines were drawn. "They're on their way," Alyssa said, glancing at the clock. "Remember, no yelling. No threats. We let the truth do the damage." Micah nodded, jaw set like stone. Ezra sat beside him, arms folded, fury simmering just beneath the surface. Leah stared at the empty seats across the table, her fingers wrapped tightly around the notebook in her lap. Naomi was home with Mrs. Holden, completely unaware that this was the meeting that would determine their future. Then the door opened. Dennis Daniels entered first, a man who used to laugh at barbecues and kiss their mother's cheek. Now his suit looked too crisp, too practiced. His smile, even faker. Curtis Daniels followed, eyes scanning the room like a hunter. And behind them, their wives, Lynn and Tricia, each carrying a stack of manila folders like they were walking into a routine business meeting. Alyssa rose. "Thank you for coming." Dennis took his seat. "We're here to clear up what I'm sure is a misunderstanding." Curtis chuckled. "We heard you've been digging into old paperwork. Digging into things that were settled a long time ago." "They weren't settled," Leah said flatly. "They were stolen." Dennis sighed, like a man being inconvenienced. "Leah, you were grieving. Emotional. We made decisions to protect the children." "You protected your own bank accounts," Micah snapped. Alyssa placed a printed document in the center of the table. "This is a sworn affidavit from Thomas Langston. In it, he admits he was paid by you, Dennis and Curtis Daniels, to destroy Robert Daniels' original will and forge new documents." Silence. Then Tricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That man's a drunk. He'd say anything to get attention." "He provided dates, details, and bank records," Alyssa said coolly. "And he's willing to testify in court." Curtis's mask cracked for just a moment. "You think this will hold up?" "We think it's enough to reopen the estate," Alyssa replied. "And to refer this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." Dennis leaned forward, his voice lower now, threatening. "What is it you really want, Leah? Money? A piece of the pie?" "We want what was ours to begin with," Leah said. "We want justice." Tricia slammed a folder down. "Your father didn't understand how trusts worked. He let emotions guide him. That money would have ruined you." Ezra stood up. "You watched us starve. You watched her break her back just to feed us. While you were buying lake houses." Dennis's voice rose. "Don't act like you were homeless. You were fed. You were clothed. In a basement with no heat," Micah snapped. "With a candle for light when they cut the power." Curtis pointed across the table. "You're just a girl with a notebook? You think a couple of documents and a confession from a washed-up lawyer is going to undo 6 years of legality?" Leah stood slowly, the notebook still in her hand. "I'm not just a girl with a notebook," she said. "I'm the legal guardian named in my father's real will. I'm the one who worked 3 jobs to keep my siblings together while you bought vacation homes with stolen money." She opened the notebook and pulled out a copy of her father's letter, the one he left in the book. "This was my dad's last instruction. Everything you'll need is at Merrill and Bay Trust. He trusted me. He trusted us. And you tried to bury every trace of that." Alyssa looked directly at Dennis. "This meeting is a courtesy. When we file next week, you'll be facing a full civil suit and possibly felony charges." Dennis looked pale now. Curtis said nothing. Tricia folded her arms. "You'll destroy the family over this?" Leah's voice didn't waver. "You destroyed it the moment you threw 4 grieving children into the street." She turned to Alyssa. "We're done here." As Leah walked out of the room, her brothers followed. Alyssa gathered the files without a word. Behind them, no one said goodbye. In the hallway, Ezra exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. "Think they'll back down?" "No," Micah said. "They'll fight. They're greedy and scared." Leah didn't speak. She didn't need to. That night, back in the basement apartment, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Day 123, they know we're coming. And this time, we're not alone." The courthouse was packed. Journalists lined the marble steps. Microphones. Cameras. Curious bystanders. Some had read about the inheritance scandal in the Tribune's Sunday feature. Others came because someone whispered, "There's a family fighting over $100 million and a girl with a notebook is winning." Inside, the air buzzed. Leah stood beside Alyssa at the plaintiff's table. Behind her, Micah sat straight-backed in a suit 2 sizes too small. Ezra fidgeted beside him. Naomi wasn't there, she was home with Mrs. Holden, but Leah could feel her presence, as if her little sister's hope had stitched itself into her spine. Across the aisle, Dennis and Curtis Daniels with a fleet of lawyers, arms crossed, smugness carefully rehearsed. Their wives sat behind them, stone-faced. Then the gavel struck. All rise. The judge entered. From gray-haired. No nonsense. Be seated. Alyssa stood first. Your Honor, we present to this court overwhelming evidence that the original will of Robert Daniels was destroyed. That a fraudulent filing allowed his brothers to seize control of assets intended for his children. That they deliberately concealed the existence of a $100 million trust and spent years enriching themselves while those children lived in poverty. She turned to the jury. But this case isn't just about money. It's about betrayal, about power, about what happens when adults entrusted to protect the vulnerable instead prey on them. Then she stepped aside. Dennis's lead attorney, a man with a deep voice and an expensive haircut, rose with mock humility. Your Honor, this case is based on emotional overreach. My client stepped in when no one else could. There was confusion. No will could be found. The children were taken in. Federal protected. Ezra whispered behind Leah, we lived in a basement with no heat. Shoo, Micah said. Alyssa's first witness was Thomas Langston. He entered the courtroom slowly, looking 20 years older than he had weeks ago. But his voice was steady. I was paid to destroy the will, he said flatly. By Dennis and Curtis Daniels. I created new documents to make it look like Robert Daniels died without one. The courtroom went still. On cross-examination, the defense attacked hard. You're a disbarred lawyer, aren't you? Yes. You've been drinking heavily. Living in a trailer. Yes. Why should anyone believe you? Langston looked directly at the jury. Because what I did destroyed a family. And I've been trying to live with it ever since. Alyssa's second witness was Mr. Holbrook from Merrill and Bay Trust. He confirmed the trust's existence. Confirmed the named beneficiaries. Confirmed that Dennis and Curtis had attempted to seize it using false documentation. Then Alyssa called Leah. She stood slowly, walked to the stand and took the oath. On the stand, she didn't cry. She spoke clearly. When my parents died, I was 20 years old. I had no job, no degree, no help. Just 3 younger siblings and a promise I made over their graves. She looked toward the jury. We lost everything. Our home, our safety, our childhood. And they, she pointed across the courtroom, let it happen while living off the money meant to protect us. The defense tried to rattle her. You're not a lawyer, not a financial expert. How can you possibly claim to understand the complexities of an estate this size? She smiled tightly. I didn't need a law degree to know we were being robbed. I just needed common sense. And a notebook. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Then it was Micah's turn. He spoke about working nights to cook dinner, doing homework by candlelight, watching his sister collapse from exhaustion. I was 16 when I learned what sacrifice meant, he said. It looked like Leah dragging herself through 3 jobs just to keep us fed while our uncles went on vacation in Florida. Then Ezra. He talked about the cold winters, the missed field trips, the humiliation of asking for extra ketchup packets because they couldn't afford condiments. We didn't just survive, he said. We learned how to fight, because Leah never stopped fighting for us. By the end of his testimony, 3 jurors were visibly emotional. The defense's case fell apart by day 3. They couldn't disprove the trust. They couldn't explain the forged documents. And worst of all, they couldn't shake the image of Leah as the girl who kept her family whole with nothing but willpower and stubborn love. Dennis took the stand, trying to save face. I believed we were doing the right thing. That Leah wasn't ready. That the money needed to be safeguarded. Alyssa leaned forward. Mr. Daniels, is it your testimony that you had no idea what the trust was worth? He hesitated. Wasn't sure. Yet you attempted to claim executor rights. You filed for control of it. You bought a second home 6 months later. With cash. He said nothing. She pressed. You weren't protecting the children. You were protecting your lifestyle. No response. You told the court you acted in good faith. Was forging documents part of that good faith? He squirmed. I never touched the paperwork. Alyssa smiled. No. You paid someone else too. Then she rested her case. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, Leah couldn't breathe. In the matter of Daniels versus Daniels, we find for the plaintiffs on all counts. Naomi's drawing of a sun and 4 stick figures, the picture taped to their apartment wall, flashed in Leah's mind. She gripped Micah's hand as the judge continued. The court orders the full reinstatement of the original trust. The defendants are ordered to pay additional punitive damages totaling $20 million. Criminal referrals will be submitted to the district attorney's office for further investigation. Leah didn't cry. She smiled. Not for the money. For the justice. For the promise kept. That night she wrote, "Day 131, we won." Then added, "But more than that, we were heard." They called it the most satisfying verdict of the year. The morning after the ruling, Leah woke up to a dozen missed calls, 27 emails, and a text from a number she didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but I followed your case. Thank you for standing up. My sister went through something similar. You gave us all hope." Her face stayed calm, but her chest shook as she sat on the edge of her bed and read it again and again. Outside, reporters crowded the sidewalk in front of the courthouse. Inside, the Daniels family was finally unraveling. Dennis Daniels had resigned from his company board that morning. Curtis had shuttered one of his businesses the week before, quietly selling off assets before the IRS came knocking. Rumors of federal charges spread fast. Tricia and Lynn were nowhere to be seen. But none of that mattered to Leah. What mattered was the letter that arrived 2 days later. It came in a thick envelope stamped with the seal of Merrill and Bay Trust. Inside was a cover letter from Mr. Holbrook and an official court order authorizing the transfer of trustee power to Leah Daniels, effective immediately. She held it in her hands for a long time, barely breathing. Micah read over her shoulder, silent. Ezra leaned against the wall, then let out a low whistle. "It's real, huh? It's real," she whispered. Leah turned the page. Beneath the court order was another document, sealed until the final verdict. It was a letter from her father, to be opened by Leah Daniels only, in the event that the trust is contested. Her fingers trembled as she peeled it open. "My Leah, if you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I want you to know, I saw it coming. Not the accident, but the possibility of betrayal. I didn't trust my brothers, and I'm sorry I never told you that. I thought I had time. Everything I built, everything I saved, it wasn't for me. It was for you. For Micah. For Ezra. For Naomi. You have always been the strongest of us. You were never just a daughter. You were a protector. A guide. You were born with something I didn't earn until I was a man, courage. If they tried to take what's yours, I know you fought. And if you're holding this now, it means you didn't give up. I am so proud of you. Don't let the money change you. Let it free you. Let it be the tool, not the goal. Let it build the life I always dreamed for you. You kept the promise. You kept our family whole. Now keep living. I've always did." Leah couldn't stop the tears this time. They came silently, steadily, like a river thawing after a long, frozen season. Later that week, she stood in front of the same judge, now in a different hearing, this one quiet, procedural. No cameras. No press. Just signatures. Authorizations. Official declarations that Leah Camille Daniels was the sole legal trustee of the Robert Daniels Family Trust, now valued at $127 million and growing. The judge glanced up as she signed the last form. "You did something rare, Ms. Daniels," he said. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You proved what's right." She smiled through damp lashes. "Thank you, Your Honor." They moved out of the basement a week later. Not into a mansion. Into a house with 4 bedrooms. A wide porch. A yard with a tree Naomi could climb. A kitchen with windows that caught the morning sun just right. Leah didn't buy a fancy car. She bought a second-hand minivan. She didn't take a vacation. She took Naomi to the dentist. She didn't splurge. She built. Micah re-enrolled in college, this time full-time, majoring in business and law. Ezra started writing, not just poems or journal entries, but a manuscript about what they'd lived through. Naomi asked if she could take art classes, and Leah said yes without checking the bank balance. She had checked enough bank balances to last a lifetime. The press kept calling. Offers came in, Book deals, documentary crews, talk shows. She turned most of them down. But one interview she accepted. A reporter asked, "What kept you going?" Leah looked into the camera and answered without hesitation. "A promise. And 3 reasons to keep it." That night, she sat at the kitchen table alone and opened her notebook one last time. She flipped past every page, every tally of missed bills, every quote from a cruel uncle, every scribbled rage after a shift ended with no tip and an empty fridge. She reached the final blank page. And she wrote, "Day 140, we kept the promise. We got our life back." Then closed the book for good. Leah stood in the center of their new living room and listened. Not for the sound of rats in the walls. Not for a dripping faucet she couldn't afford to fix. Not for the soft hum of a heater barely holding on through winter. This time, she listened to silence. Warm, clean, peaceful silence. The kind that comes when the weight is finally off your chest. Micah walked in with a stack of packages under one arm and a backpack slung over the other. "Textbooks came in," he said. "My course load's heavier than I thought, but I'm excited." "Engineering or pre-law?" Leah asked, smiling. "Both," he said. "Double major." She raised her eyebrows. "Ambitious." He grinned. "Runs in the family." Ezra passed through the room next, earbuds in, a notepad tucked under his arm. "Do not disturb," he muttered dramatically. "Genius in progress." Leah laughed. "What are you writing now?" "A memoir. Working title, The Basement Years. I want royalties." Ezra waved her off. Then Naomi came skipping down the stairs in her new art smock, a paintbrush in one hand and a blob of blue paint on her cheek. "Can we make pancakes today?" she asked. "Of course," Leah said. It had become tradition again, Sunday pancakes. The one luxury they had clung to in the basement now felt like a celebration. It wasn't just food. It was a reminder, we survived. As Leah flipped pancakes in a sunlit kitchen for the first time in years, she realized something strange. She wasn't tired. Not just physically, but spiritually. She didn't feel like she was scraping to exist. She was building. Later that week, she visited Mrs. Holden, their old landlord, now in her 70s and retired. Leah handed her a white envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. "Leah," the old woman gasped, pulling out the slip. "No, I can't accept this." "It's not charity," Leah said. "It's repayment. For giving us a home when no one else would. For not asking questions. For letting us pay half a deposit and stay late on rent." Mrs. Holden blinked through tears. "I always knew there was something special about you." The next phase came quickly. With Alyssa's help, Leah launched the Daniels Foundation for Youth Justice, focusing on children who had been displaced by guardianship fraud or financial abuse. They started small, legal aid clinics, emergency housing stipends, educational grants for siblings trying to stay together. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Micah helped design the intake system, streamlining paperwork to identify red flags. Ezra created digital content to share stories and reach families too afraid to speak. Naomi painted murals on the foundation walls. Bold colors, happy faces, children holding hands under bright suns. One of them wore a green smock. Another carried a notebook. "I thought that one was me," Naomi said proudly. "It is," Leah whispered. "And the one with the notebook? That was her. Still writing. Still watching. Still fighting, just with a different kind of weapon." One night, Micah came home and found Leah standing alone in the backyard, hands in her coat pockets, staring at the stars. "You good?" he asked. "I don't know what to do with the quiet," she said. He stepped beside her. "You don't have to do anything. That's the point. You built this life. Now live in it." "I feel guilty sometimes," she admitted. "For being okay." Micah's voice softened. "You earned okay. Maybe more than anyone I know." They stood together for a while in silence. Then she smiled. "I'm thinking of going back to school," she said. Micah's eyes widened. "You are?" "Online, part-time," she added quickly. "Education major." I still want to teach." He beamed. "About time you did something for yourself." She looked at him sideways. You mean besides saving your life? Yeah, he said, bumping her shoulder. Besides that. In the months that followed, things shifted slowly, not in big, dramatic ways, but in subtle ones. Ezra got published in a youth journal. Naomi's art was featured in a local gallery. Micah made the dean's list. And Leah? She finally learned how to sleep with the lights off. She learned how to wake up without dread in her chest. She learned how to dream again. One afternoon, as she sat in the foundation office, flipping through scholarship applications, she paused at a handwritten letter from a 17-year-old girl named Mariah. I have 3 little sisters and I've been raising them since our mom got sick. People keep telling me to give up. But your story made me believe I can keep us together. I just wanted to say thank you. Leah blinked back tears and reached for her pen. Dear Mariah, don't give up. Keep your promises. And remember, strength isn't loud. Sometimes it just shows up every day and refuses to quit. You've already won. Now go build something with it. She signed it. Leah Daniels, director. Former big sister. Forever fighter. 10 years. That's how long it had been since Leah stood in front of a judge and reclaimed what was hers. 10 years since the basement. 10 years since her uncle sat across from her and said she wasn't enough. And now, at 30, Leah Daniels stood in front of a crowded auditorium in downtown Chicago, wearing a navy blue suit and holding a microphone, about to address a crowd of 500 people. The backdrop behind her read, The Daniels Foundation, a decade of justice. A future of hope. She took a breath, scanning the faces. In the front row sat Micah, now an attorney and her chief legal officer. Ezra sat beside him, his 3rd book tucked under one arm, a proud smirk on his face. Naomi sat between them, in a green silk dress, one of her murals displayed behind the stage, glowing with color. Leah stepped forward. 10 years ago, she began, I was just a 20-year-old girl with 3 siblings, a notebook, and no idea how I was going to keep us together. A quiet ripple of laughter. Heads nodded. We had no heat, no money, no help, but we had something no one could take, our promise to each other. She paused, steadying her voice. That promise carried us through betrayal, through courtrooms, through nights we didn't know how we'd make it to morning. And when we came out the other side, we realized that justice wasn't just something you win in court. It's something you build every day. She looked at Naomi, then Micah, then Ezra. And once you've been given that second chance, it becomes your job to open the door for someone else. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Leah smiled, blinking back tears. It was full circle. After the event, she slipped outside for air. Chicago was loud and alive. Taxis honking, sirens in the distance, the buzz of conversations spilling from cafes. She leaned on a railing overlooking the river, letting the breeze tangle her curls. Impressive speech, said a voice behind her. She turned to see David, a quiet architect she had met 6 months ago during a zoning project for one of the foundation's shelters. He wasn't flashy, not powerful, just kind. He'd never once asked her about the trust. He asked about Naomi's paintings instead, about whether she liked pancakes or waffles better, about her favorite book as a kid. He stood beside her now, slipping his hand into hers without asking. You think your dad would be proud? He asked. Leah didn't hesitate. I know he would. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I think you've given away more than you've kept, he said gently. Money, time, energy. Leah smiled. That was always the point. They stood in silence for a while, until her phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Holden, now retired and living in Florida. Naomi just called to tell me about the mural. You raised them right, Leah. You kept every promise. I hope you finally know how proud we all are of you. She read it twice, then tucked the phone away. Back at home that night, she tucked Naomi's newest sketchbook into the bookshelf beside Ezra's novels. On the kitchen wall hung framed covers of Time, Forbes, and the Chicago Tribune, all with headlines that once seemed unimaginable. From basement to boardroom, how one sister defeated a $100 million fraud. Justice rebuilt. She kept the promise. The front door opened. Micah walked in with his toddler son, Robert, perched on his shoulders. Ezra followed, arm in arm with his husband, carrying bags of groceries. Naomi came last, humming a song she'd just composed for a community art program. Dinner that night was loud. Laughter spilled into every corner of the house. There were jokes about burned garlic bread and Ezra's tragic attempt at mashed potatoes. And when it was time for dessert, Leah rose and tapped a glass. "I just want to say, thank you. For not letting go of me. For being the reason I fought so hard. For reminding me every day what this family means." Micah raised his glass. "To Leah." Ezra added, "To promises kept." Naomi smiled, eyes shining. "To the girl with the notebook." They clinked glasses. And for the first time in her life, Leah didn't feel like she was holding everything together. She felt held. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, she walked into her office and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was the original spiral-bound notebook. Tattered edges. Coffee stains. Scribbled lines of desperation and determination. She flipped to the last blank page. And wrote, "Day 3650, we built a life out of the ashes. We didn't just survive. We thrived." Then closed it for the last time. And let the silence wrap around her like peace. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Tell us in the comments, what promise have you kept for someone you love? Share this video with someone who believes in fighting for what's right. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true-to-life stories of courage, justice, and family. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person with a notebook to change everything.